What's up, everyone? What's up? It's Danny Dhaiphong here. How do I sound? Let me know how I sound. How do I look? I just moved, so things are going to be a little bare for a while. The lighting may not be that good because the lighting hasn't all been set up. It's a pretty dark apartment right now. So, how are you all doing this evening? It's been a while. Let me know how I sound. Just give me a quick sound check. I did test a little bit before this, but I'm trying not to. Sometimes I notice because I think that this is too quiet. I speak too loud, and then it creates all sorts of issues. So, hello. It's good to be back. It's good to be back this evening. I'm just gonna mute myself really quick. I want to move the mic a bit. Hold on one second. All right, let's start that again. Good evening, everyone. I hope you liked that new introduction. Someone who's helping me out, who's really good at this sort of thing, has been putting together these kind of materials, and I'm really appreciative of it. It looks great. It sounds great enough. Have to use the YouTube free audio. Certainly, I would love to use music that I enjoy, but because of copyright and YouTube's very strict, really repressive, and really the whole music and the whole media industry is really repressive grip on music and art and all of that. Have to use the YouTube free audio. So I hope you like that. I think it's incredible. I think, just having the label here, having these kind of things be rolled out to make this channel look better than it did before has been great. Yeah. So I see Richard says he hates the music. Sorry about that. Uh, Honestly, Richard, there aren't many good options. That was the one that just fit my taste a little bit more than the others. There was just a lot of them fit these. It's kind of like elevator type music, a lot of it. So um, appreciate the opinion though. Seriously, I don't think very strongly of it. It just it fits my taste a bit better. So let me say hello to folks really quick. Hello, David. Hi, Desert Mantis. Hello, Loa. Good to see you. Hello, 31st Century Socialism. Hello, Pen Dog. Hello, Troglodyte. Nice name. Hello, Dixon. Hi, Where. Good to see all of you. It's been about 8 days. Good, Trayvon. How are you doing? Or Trevorn, I should say. Hi, John. Um, Gonna catch me at the slow speed. Some people say I talk too slow. Whatever. So uh, hello, Kenneth, I should say. I sound echoey. That's because the apartment is very echoey. I'm sorry. You're gonna hear just a little bit more of an echo than usual, probably for several days, if not a week, because moving's a process. Okay. Hello, Jorge. Hello, Holly. Hi, Kathy. How are you? Good to see all of you tonight. So I'm going to keep the hellos there. Thank you, David, for the super sticker. And then hi, Shaniqua. Thanks for the compliment on the music. I like it. I don't love it, but I like it enough to use it. Um, so, welcome everyone. Good evening. There's so much to catch up on. I swear, when I was moving this week and having to arrange all this logistically, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the world is on fire. That's why I titled this stream "The World on Fire." I mean, what has happened? I can't even I can't even summarize all of it. I'm gonna miss a bunch of things. Like, for example, tonight we're not going to be talking about Iran. We will eventually talk about Iran on this channel. I'm hoping to have Mr. Professor Mohammed Marandi on this program. Hopefully, going to work that out very soon. So hopefully he'll be on some point next month. Hopefully sooner than later. But we have some special announcements. So of course, while you're here, though, like that video, like the video. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure that you are hitting that notifications bell so you get notified when I go live, when I post, etc. And of course, to support this work, all of these things that I'm doing, the labor it takes, um, all of this whole channel, it's sustained by all of you and my other work as well, the articles, etc. Please do consider supporting on Patreon at patreon.com/Dhaiphong. That's the best way to support. I would love, it's about the end of the month. I was hoping for about $75 per month more this month, but may not get there. But of course, if you're able to support, you can. And there are other ways on Substack as well, and other ways in the description of this video. So, as I was saying before, let's really get started here, okay? First, just an announcement, okay? And I'll do announcements at the end as well. October 1st, I will have a very special guest. The Durant will be coming on here. The Durant, I should say. I said the Durant, not Kevin Durant. The Durant, the YouTube channel, which was it was a media organization, institution before it was on YouTube. I remember reading it back when I was trying to figure out Russia, and they had a lot of good material on that when I first started looking at the NATO encirclement of Russia. Why would that be? What is this animus toward Vladimir Putin? Well, I'm going to have Alexander Mercurius. I think I'm going to also have Mr. Christofaros on here as well. Unclear, but definitely Alexander Mercurius is coming on October 1st. That will be 9 p.m. Eastern time that Saturday evening. So it'll be a really good conversation. We're going to do all things Ukraine as well. So this stream is mostly about Ukraine. And then we're going to get a little deeper maybe than I can even get into, because they've been following this conflict. They've been following this situation for a while. So that's coming up. And there's also a lot of different things that we're working on as well coming up, which will be announced in kind. But that's really the big announcement for this evening. All right. So we're going to have an interesting conversation because, it is going to be, I think we share a lot of politics on the Ukraine situation globally, etc. But it should be very interesting, bringing our two perspectives on this together. And certainly I respect their work on geopolitics quite a lot. It's something I've been following them for a while, kind of like Brian Berletic when he was doing all of his articles, under his pen name. So I've been following both of them for quite a while. So I look forward to that. October 1st, 9 p.m. Eastern. Save the date. All right. So let's get started. The world is on fire, and there's so many reasons for this, right? We don't even have to even look at right now. You have Hurricane Ian just destroying the South. Florida decimated by this. They're saying hundreds dead in Florida, perhaps unaccounted for. One of my wife's best friends lives down there. She had to evacuate. It's a disaster. I've been seeing JB Font posts from RBN. It's just a disaster, especially what poor and working class people in that state are going through right now. But it's really affecting everybody, and the destruction is absolutely. It just shows that this government doesn't care about working class people, and that these natural disasters are just completely and utterly allowed to do what they do. And of course, there's the climate question. But we're not talking about that tonight. That's just one area. When we also could talk about Iran, right? The violent unrest in Iran, where you have security forces being attacked. You have what looks to be a color revolution. I haven't been able to study it as deeply as I would like, but I know for a fact that when you have loyalists, right, or royalists, I should call them, the old royalists spewing propaganda about Iran, when you have the so-called Green Movement, the MEK, which has been a designated terrorist organization in the past, but the United States supports it. When you have those forces really leading the way, something is wrong. And of course, you have a lot of hand-wringing about that when it comes to the rights of women, trying to paint Iran as this completely and utterly repressive place for women without any acknowledgement of all of the gains that Iran has made since the era of the Shah. And since the fact that Iran, despite being a country that does have an Islamic law, right, as part of its organization and its state, has been able to lift the conditions for all people, including women, far greater than other countries, and it doesn't have the same draconian attitude as, let's say, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. It's not in that category, no matter what Tulsi Gabbard says. But we are not talking about Iran here, because I honestly was not able to catch up to that as much. But in my opinion, it looks and smells like a color revolution. So you have that happening, and you have the environmental situation, Florida, all of that happening as well. But over the last, I would say, 8 days or so, it has been a whirlwind of developments when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, when it comes to the special military operation that Russia is currently waging. There's so many things happening in the last week alone. I'll just list them, because we're going to really focus in on the most recent development. But what did we have? We had, again, the corporate media talk about the nuclear threat. And that's not because of anything that they're just making up. Actually, Russia has been, especially Dmitry Medvedev in the National Security Council over in Russia, has been signaling that Russia will use nuclear weapons if it feels that its doctrine is being challenged. And now we have to clarify what that means. What it means is that if Russia feels that its borders are being encroached upon, that they are being crossed and violated, then they have the right to use nuclear weapons if that's where things are going to go, because Russia is not going to sit idly by and allow itself to be engulfed by NATO's proxy war and have that turn into a hot war that Russia does not want to be engaging in. It will use the nuclear option. That's what Russia has been saying, and it's been completely misconstrued. Oh, what if Russia does use one? No, they're saying that if they have to use them to defend themselves, they will. And it sounds nightmarish, and that's because it is, because the United States and NATO has brought us to this point. That's the nightmare. That's the nightmare that we're living under, is that the United States and NATO think that they have, and I should just say the U.S.-NATO alliance, because it is the United States at the lead of this. They think this warmongering set of countries, these imperialists, think that they can do whatever they want. And Russia is saying, absolutely not. So you had that happen amid the partial mobilization that Russia began around September 21st. And right after that, all the fears of a nuclear holocaust, so to speak, that were being bandied about. I mean, this isn't the first time. This has happened many times. April, I had clients of mine talking to me about, I'm scared of nuclear warfare back in April, because the media was doing the same thing. And Russia, of course, is going to say, when asked, yes, we have a nuclear doctrine and we will enforce it. We will use these weapons if we are forced to. So you had the partial mobilization, but then you also had the four referendums that happened. The referenda that happened, Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, and there was one other. I always forget the name of that. It's such a long name. Zaporozhye. So you had these four localities in the Donbass vote this past week to join the Russian Federation. And so these two things are connected, because they voted overwhelmingly, 99+%, every territory, every locality said 90+%, we're going to the Russian Federation. So that's going to happen. And the reason why the nuclear conversation is very important is because now the special military operation with Russia has expanded, right? Now it's not just we are going to protect and be in solidarity with Donbass. Now parts of Donbass are Russia, and Russia will recognize them as such. And if Ukraine begins shelling, begins using advanced military weaponry, and begins what looks like an invasion of Russia, because now the borders have changed, well, that's where the fear is, because Russia will then say, well, now we have to think about other military options. And I think that is where the corporate media is trying to seize, the Western corporate media is trying to seize on its fear-mongering, is through that scenario, which is a very real one that they don't want to go over, the imperialists, they don't want to go over it with any kind of tact, with any kind of care. But that is really the scenario that we should be concerned about. First off, the referendums in these localities have been completely and utterly dismissed. So we have a situation like in 2015, but at a much larger scale, and now with stakes much higher. In 2015, Crimea became part of the Russian Federation, but now you have the same development, but at a much larger scale with much higher stakes occurring, and yeah, this could put Russia and NATO forces completely and utterly in conflict with each other. At least NATO weaponry and Ukraine's military. Indirect conflict, rather than this being a special military operation, as Russia's called it, which is more like a very targeted military campaign that really relies on what were independent forces from Russia. Now, a lot of the Donbass is going to Russia. So that's what makes this very significant. So you had that happen, right? So you have this nuclear war conversation, the partial mobilization by Russia, getting troops ready, bringing people out of retirement, right? A very targeted partial mobilization, but still significant, right? Of a couple 100,000, I believe it was. Still not a huge mobilization, but it's to send a message and also to strengthen Russia's hand when Russia believes it still has all of the advantages in the special military operation. So you had that happen, and then on Monday, what happened? Well, Nord Stream 2 was taken out. Both Nord Streams, by the way. But Nord Stream 1 and 2 are now essentially inoperable because they said there were some explosions, some leakages first that were discovered that were caused by some kind of explosion, which essentially means, and all the media is saying this, Western corporate media, Russian media, doesn't matter where you go, they're saying it had to be sabotage. And of course, the West is blaming Russia, and we'll get into that. And Russia and other countries are looking and saying, well, in whose interest is this? To whose benefit? Because the Nord Stream pipelines, and immediately I thought of Pepe Escobar. I was like, man, maybe I should have had him come on this evening if he had time, but I didn't feel like there was time. Maybe sometime in the future, because he is the pipeline kind of czar, in my opinion. And I immediately thought of him because I thought of how significant this development is and how just absolutely out of this world it seems for what it looks like the United States and its allies to basically sabotage the entire EU, Germany especially, but really you're talking about just a catastrophic event for Germany, but really from the EU's perspective, the entire continent, because of what? Because of some kind of campaign to slander Russia? No, this is obvious. In my opinion, of course, we don't have all the evidence for this, but I'm going to present a case. I'm going to just present what we know thus far, that it seems like the United States did this. It seems like the United States did this to use, again, as I've been saying on this program, to use its proxy war with Russia over Ukraine, in Ukraine, to sink Europe, right? So if the EU is a sinking ship and the United States is the commander seeking to obliterate the EU, well, the proxy war is the cannon. It's the cannon. They're using it as the cannon to finish the job, because of course the EU has been going the way of the United States for quite some time, privatizing, right, solidifying its subservience to U.S. foreign policy. But there was still some tension there. And I think this is an important lesson before I before I go on. I just want to say that this is a prime example of why capitalism and the United States at the head of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, This is why no matter how much unity there is, no matter how much what it seems like that there's some kind of unified imperialist bloc willing to do and follow the same agenda, no matter how much that seems like the case, what the United States is doing to the Europe is showing that indeed imperialism is still predicated on capitalist competition, and the United States does not want to see Europe become closer with Russia, does not want to see Europe become closer with China. It does not want to see Europe maintain any kind of semblance of industry. It wants to loot what is left of Europe. It wants to plunder Europe, but economically. It doesn't need to use the same military means because Europe bows down to the United States. And it needs Europe for military purposes as well as economic ones. So it uses a different kind of warfare, one that I think is a mixture of what we've seen happen to the global South, just applied to a different context. So right now, the United States is demonstrating to us all that imperialism is still predicated on that competition. And no matter how aligned the ruling class seems, this is not about some kind of loyalty to a class. This is about super profits. This is about running away with whatever you can and using the Russia special military operation in Ukraine, using this proxy war as the pretext, as a justification. So we have to go over this just incredible event that happened, the Nord Stream 2, the sabotage of Nord Stream 2. As you might have seen in the thumbnail of the live stream of this video, welcome to the shit show. I mean, that's basically what this Nord Stream 2, the Nord Stream incident, the sabotage of it really amounts to. And so I want to just show you. So after this happened, okay, there was a lot of conversation about this. People were wondering who done it, who did this, because this is going to put Germany, this is going to put Europe in a worse position than it already was, because everyone knew winter was coming. We've covered it on this program. We see the inflation, we see the energy crisis, we see Russia having leverage in this situation because it provided damn near half of the gas alone to the EU, and these sanctions causing blowback. But now this pipeline, Nord Stream 1 was already instrumental, and Nord Stream 2 was only going to further cement this relationship. Now Europe is looking completely effed. Completely and utterly effed. And Russia is also going to bear the consequences of this, because Russia still needs to get its energy to Europe. And now two major pipelines, one that was in operation already and another that was about to be in operation. Russia's claiming there was gas ready to be pumped. And we're going to talk about the timing. This just, it doesn't make any sense what the West says. The West says, even the EU is saying this. They're saying it was probably Russia. The United States, of course, is trying to blame Russia, but it absolutely makes no sense, because this would be akin to Bashar al-Assad in the Syrian government winning in Syria, beating back the terrorists, beating back the armed groups, beating back NATO, beating back imperialism, and then saying, yeah, let's just go gas some kids in a hospital. This is the same, except this is even worse, because yes, it's horrible to think about chemical weapons killing children. Yeah, that's horrible. But notwithstanding, that's a horrible thing. But this situation that's a short-term tragedy horror. This is a medium and long-term catastrophe for all involved. So it doesn't make any sense, at least all involved outside of the United States. But there's a paper trail here. It's not just that we have suspicions about the United States. There is a paper trail. And let's just go over that. First, let's just go over some of the initial reactions. This is probably the one that's been the most talked about, and we should talk about this one. So here we have the uh, member of the European Parliament, and he's a lot more than this, Radek Sikorski. He was in the Defense Department over in Poland. He's rabidly anti-Russian. I'm going to go over his history in a bit. We're just going to read his bio from the Center for Strategic International Studies, which is a State Department, U.S., basically militarist think tank. This is what he said, though. It's deleted now. But this person took a screenshot and said, "Thank you, USA." That's what he said. This was immediately after it was reported, mind you. When was this? It was reported on Monday. This is September 27th. So immediately after it was found out, right, that this had happened, a picture of the damage. This is a famous photo now. Everyone's sharing it. But a member of the European Parliament, rabidly anti-Russia, Poland, which is key in this, attempt to encircle Russia, and Poland has been basically a lapdog for NATO. Look at this. "Thank you, USA," he says. So that was just the first point. And then we can just go over a little bit of who this Radek fellow is, Mr. Member of the European Parliament out of Poland. Here is who this gentleman is. He's not some kind of just benign actor. He's not some kind of face of neutrality here. He is a fellow, a non-resident fellow over at the Center for Strategic International Studies, which is funded by major European governments. It's funded by the United States, the State Department, by all sorts of other forces of imperialism. But look at who he is. So now he's a senior fellow over at Harvard University Center for European Studies. But he was a former minister of defense in Poland and the foreign minister all the way up until 2014, Speaker of the Parliament in 2014-15. And here's more Solidarity. He was in Solidarity, which of course is the CIA-backed movement against the socialist bloc. It's been really influential on, unfortunately, a lot of some of these fourth international so-called communists. But Solidarity is a CIA movement. So he was a leader on the strike committee. So that's where he comes from. And then, of course, the American Enterprise Institute. He was a resident scholar over there. We've talked about them on this channel, just another corporate U.S. government-backed think tank. But I found this the most interesting here. He proposed and helped set up the European Endowment of Democracy. So the National Endowment for Democracy and the European Endowment for Democracy, those are two sister organizations or brother organizations, or what, those are very interlocked organizations. That is the intelligence apparatus basically at work. So this guy, he is not neutral, okay? Mr. Sikorski is someone who perhaps had some insider knowledge, but his reaction to this, I think, should show us, right? Should show us what, if anything, what even those who are so rabidly pro-US, pro-imperialist, who have made their whole careers on building up to this moment, what they think, right? This is what they think about this. They think the United States done it. And who knows? Sikorski is this the kind of guy who might actually know who did it, given his connections to the military intelligence apparatus. So I want to now show you, okay, what Joe Biden said. So this is also going around. So Mr. Joe Biden has been now questioned, right? I think most of the world wants to know more about his comments, because you may not know this, but Victoria Nuland, who is now, the Under Secretary of State under Tony Blinken, and, Joe Biden himself, what happened, right, with Nord Stream 2 before, as this special military operation began, the U.S. pressured Germany to halt it's essentially, it was already built, but they did pressure Germany to cease finding a date when they would turn on the spigot, basically, when they would allow for the transport of LNG to begin with Nord Stream 2. And Joe Biden had this to say, though, when asked about it. Okay. And so a lot of people are saying, well, shouldn't we be looking at this? Shouldn't we be looking at what Joe Biden was saying? So Joe Biden said on February 7th, before the special military operation began, he told the media that he would bring an end to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And of course, some might see this as, well, they did pressure Germany to halt its implementation and its usage. But it's these words, right, have been, you know, have been found to be more important now, because there has been direct action, what looks like military action, on the pipeline to cease even the ability for this pipeline to be used. So this is what Joe Biden had to say back at that time. Okay, I'm going to play it right now.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
So that video was RT, and I thought it was actually quite a clever video. But there you have it. Joe Biden says, I promise you we will end it. And now, so ending is a very particular term. They pressured Germany to halt usage. That did happen. But ending is a particular kind of language, and I'm not a lawyer. But when you say you're going to end something, it doesn't mean you're just going to temporarily stop it. It means you're going to obliterate it, right? You're going to cease its existence. And that's what has happened here. Okay. I'll just pull it up now. This is what they're saying about Nord Stream 2. And I'm just going to pull this up really quickly because, I think this is important. RT was reporting that, this damage might be irreparable to Nord Stream. So the Russian gas pipelines earlier suffered a sabotage attack, and it's saying that Germany's Tass Spiegel is reporting Wednesday that government circles are saying that the damage is irreparable. So government circles. Who's that? Probably, I'm sure, the NATO imperialist bloc, especially the United States. If the damage is not repaired quickly enough, too much salty seawater could run to the pipes lying at the bottom of the sea and corrode them, German officials have warned. According to the news media outlet, Denmark said on Wednesday that authorities would be able to launch a probe into the issue no sooner than a week or two due to safety concerns. So there's already delays in just figuring it out. So this damage could be catastrophic. The pipelines may never operate again. And that is just really bad news for Europe. Pretty bad news for Russia too, but really bad news. So here you have Russia pointing the finger, right? A German MP, Rudolf Kaiswetter, said an attack on the energy supply infrastructure is intended to spread fear and terror. It is likely that Russia is trying to stir up uncertainty among the European population, he added, accusing Moscow of employing state terrorism approach. So you have more people. German Parliament's Defense Committee, Mary Agnes, told journalists, it cannot be ruled out that such attacks will be directed by Russia to shake our markets. So you have Germany, who is the principal loser in all of this, basically blaming Russia, blaming the partner. So talk about shooting yourself in the foot. You are essentially telling people, I'm going to end it here because there's so much more to get to. But basically, the damage is irreparable. And then you have Germany saying, oh, well, Russia did it. No evidence, no proof. Plus, it just completely goes against logic. Why would Russia want to make it harder for itself to sell very expensive natural gas to Europe while their sanctions are causing the prices to go way up. Why would Europe want to do that? I mean, why would Russia want to do that? Answer is it really would not want to do that. So, but there's more to this. It's not just that you have this this Polish member of the European Parliament, former, spook collaborator, and a member of Poland's right-wing imperialist, at least junior imperialist government. But you have Biden also talking about ending the Nord Stream 2 pipeline back in February before this all started. And you also have a few other developments that I think are worth noting. One, immediately after this happened, the CIA seemed to be covering its tracks. I don't know if you caught that. Immediately, the CIA was saying, oh, well, we were warning of something like this happening weeks ago. And here is what the CIA had to say. The CIA had warned European government of potential attacks on pipelines. So this happened right after. It was like covering tracks. And of course, Mr. Sanger is he's very spook connected, Mr. David Sanger. So the CIA issued a vague warning in June to a number of European nations, including Germany, that the 2 Nord Stream gas pipelines that carry natural gas from Russia could be targeted in forthcoming attacks. 3 senior officials familiar with the intelligence said on Tuesday. So basically, the spooks are covering their tracks, saying, I don't know, we didn't do it, but we warned you something would happen. Sounds a little weird, right? The warning was not specific, the officials said, and they declined to say whether Russia itself was identified as a possible attacker. American officials said that while it appeared likely that the damage to the pipelines was a result of sabotage, they had reached no conclusion about who might have been responsible. Both pipelines suffered a sudden loss of pressure and released gas into the sea, as European officials reported, and the chances that both suffered accidents nearly simultaneously seemed low. So the CIA declined to comment on the warning right after, but it seems like the CIA is actually the one commenting. This is being leaked out from U.S. intelligence. And so the German publication Der Spiegel was the first to report that the U.S. had provided what intelligence officials call strategic warnings of a possible attack, a warning that came with no specifics about the likely time or place or manner of a potential strike. They must think we're stupid. Are we stupid? Sometimes I just think when I read the corporate media, when I read the spooks talking across each other like this, I just think to myself, am I being gaslit? Literally, the CIA is saying they were warning European officials, European nations, Germany in particular, that Nord Stream was going to be under attack. They're not going to say who by who, what they know, how much they know, when will it happen, how will it happen, but it's going to happen. And now they must think we're fools, because if you tell, I can't even think about what would be an equivalent in just day-to-day life. This could really only happen within the halls of the U.S. intelligence apparatus, the real state, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. This could only happen in that world, because any other scenario where this could be acceptable just does not exist. It's not, it's like one of those things where you have like a lot of information you don't want to tell anyone, and then you say, oh, I have all this information. It's like an episode of Seinfeld. It's like you have a lot of this information and you can't tell anyone, and then you tell the person that you don't want to tell. You're like, hey, I have this information, but I can't tell anyone. And then they're like, well, tell me. It's like, no, I can't. It's a secret. Well, tell me. And then you eventually tell them. That's what this feels like, except this is U.S. covert political officials, intelligence operatives, basically gaslighting European nations, and those nations being okay with it because they're in on the game too, and they're all just hiding everything from everyone because it's obvious that how can it not be a false flag? This is a false flag meant to spur a crisis, and the crisis is to, one, try to cripple Russia even further, create more justifications for sanctions, spend more money. As I see James Christian here, thanks for the super chat. Yes, another 12 billion to Ukraine, so pumping more money into this, creating more of a pretext for why there cannot be peace, snipe out dialogues. I mean, there's so many reasons for this, and we're going to get into it. We're going to get into more reasons for this, but I mean, they must think we're stupid. So you have that, okay? And there's much more to this. So let me continue. It's not just that the CIA was warning, but there's a lot of suspicions about this also because NATO was literally conducting drills right by the Nord Stream pipelines just recently. Just recently. Not literally in July. NATO was conducting drills right by the Nord Stream leak site. So this is the Russian news agency, the old TASS. NATO member countries conducted drills. Let me zoom in. NATO member countries conducted drills in July using deep sea equipment near the Nord Stream's leak site. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said on a briefing on Thursday in July there are NATO drills with the use of deep sea equipment in the area of the island of Bornholm. Zakharova also stressed the region was crammed with NATO infrastructure. On Tuesday, of course, we had the Nord Stream AG company reported three threads of Nord Stream 1 and 2 offshore gas pipelines had suffered unprecedented damage on Monday. And then you have the spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov of Moscow, saying that he was deeply concerned about the news and did not rule out that the pipeline's operation could have been disrupted by an act of sabotage. And Swedish seismologists later reported that the two explosions had been recorded along the Nord Stream pipelines on Monday. So basically, that's the report. There were drills there. I mean, of course, we can't say whether those drills were to commit something like this, but this is U.S. military hardware, U.S. military personnel, and European, of course, NATO and other NATO countries all conducting drills near this site not a couple months ago. So you have a lot of suspicious activity here, which would make me think maybe we should question those who are saying it's Russia. I mean, just a thought. So, you have, the warnings, the irreparable damage, and then you have the timing of all of this. All right. There's some really important points about the timing of all of this that we have to get into. One, we have to look at this first as being of no benefit to Russia. The whole Russia did it narrative makes absolutely no sense unless you believe that Russia behaves like the United States and has the luxury, no matter what you think of the Russian government, has the luxury to behave like the United States, has the luxury to behave like NATO. Russia does not have the luxury to act like the world is under its dominion because that's not the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground say that Russia is encircled by NATO, that Russia is constantly under pressure from the U.S.-NATO alliance, that there's pressure to destroy Russia. Biden, Lloyd Austin, they all say it. So the whole Russia did it narrative absolutely already, just on that basis alone, doesn't make much sense. But then when you think about this, this was a Russia, Germany, of course, there were other countries, Sweden, pipeline. But Russia and Germany, the two biggest players, because of the two biggest economies, they contributed the most to the construction of this pipeline. It was a huge deal for both of these countries in terms of their continued industrial growth and their ability to maintain sovereignty, especially for Russia. So Russia's government is saying, and here's RT, that the Nord Stream explosion is a big problem for Russia. So if it's a big problem for Russia, why would they want to cause problems for themselves? It will bring nothing but ruin for both Russia and the EU, said Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for Russia's government. They denounced allegations as stupid and absurd of being behind the suspected explosions of Nord Stream natural gas pipelines earlier this week, stating that the incident actually creates many issues for Russia. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for Russia's government, said it's a big problem for Russia as it had essentially lost its gas supplies routes to Europe. So this is a big part of Russia's economy. As I said before, 40% of all of the Europe's natural gas was coming from Russia, and that doesn't even include other forms of energy. But because Russia also exports oil, but gas is a huge part of this, and now its supply routes are gone. So they were pumped full of gas and prepared to deliver to Europe at the time of the alleged explosion, Peskov said, saying that this gas is very expensive, and now it is all going up in the air. So it's wasted money. So this idea that Russia did it again, it's like, okay, we must have a really racist, jingoistic opinion of Russia to not understand that a country is not going to sabotage itself like this amid a proxy war with very formidable foes. Okay? So so here we go. So it says, Peskov noted earlier that neither Russia nor Europe had anything to gain from the destruction of the pipeline, especially Germany, for which this incident poses a threat to the future development of its industry, as well as profitability and competitiveness. So American suppliers of liquid natural gas, on the other hand, have been making incredible profits after having multiplied their deliveries to the European continent, Peskov pointed out, adding that these companies are, quote, very interested in maintaining these super-duper profits in the future, end quote. While no suspects of the incident have been officially named, the Kremlin spokesperson advised against making any official announcements for a proper investigation into the incident. So, they go over some of the suspicious, paper trail that's been left. But the point is that Russia is not happy about this. And while, these are two big routes, it's not all of the energy. Russia, I think, is projecting something like negative 2.9% growth for the next year because of this. And so it's significant. That's a big dip in economic growth. Russia has actually been doing quite well. And so this will create a barrier to that. But then they say there will be growth in the future because Russia has other ways to transport its gas and energy. It just won't be as profitable, and it also won't be as plentiful. So really, this is about slowing down Russia. And who in Germany too, and what alliance could have interest in doing that? Well, it seems like the US NATO alliance has a big interest in doing that. And so, there's a timing issue with this as well, because you have the referendums happening where Russia is now announcing, I think it was today, the day of this stream, where Russia is now acknowledging and verifying Kherson and Zaporozhye and the other Donetsk, Lugansk, now starting to acknowledge these results. Now there's going to be a formalization of these localities in the Donbass into the Russian Federation. So you have that happening, which is a big deal. No matter how much the United States and NATO want to poo-poo it, want to say it doesn't matter. No, it's a big deal because it changes the map. It changes the proxy war. It changes everything. So that's happening. But also, Joe Laurie over at Consortium News has a really good point here, and I want to bring it up about the timing of this. So, as I said before, the timing of this attack could not have been more convenient. Because on the one hand, I'm just going to summarize a few points before getting into the material. You had in Uzbekistan, and we're going to get into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in a minute, but you had the summit for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization occur. And while there, Vladimir Putin was asked a lot of questions about the sanctions, about the economic situation, about gas and energy, etc. And Vladimir Putin said, and we're going to read exactly what he said, but he said he was ready to supply natural gas to Germany in particular very, very soon, if not immediately, should the sanctions be lifted. And with these referendums happening, and with the map of the war changing, or the proxy war, I should say, changing, there was a distinct possibility that Russia's leverage would have pressured, coming into the winter time where gas is going to be very important for Europe, pressured some kind of at least initial conversation to begin easing these sanctions. And it is my opinion that destroying the Nord Stream pipelines is kind of a way to continue the sanctions, because now you can blame Russia, add more sanctions, and you also create economic damage, which is kind of akin to sanctions, right? Except this is a real material kind of sanctions where they're actually destroying economic civilian infrastructure, like a war crime was committed. I mean, we don't have a nation state actor we don't have a lot of evidence. We don't have the evidence to say it was a nation state actor, but it seems to me that it's connected to a real agenda. And so the timing of this is very interesting because it seems like as winter is coming, that there will be more opportunities to begin this economic activity again. And the United States doesn't want that. It doesn't want that because that would undermine the whole basis of the US's response. It's not just pumping weapons into Ukraine. These sanctions are critical because it's both an economic and political act of warfare. It's supposed to weaken Russia. It's not doing that. But if you get rid of the sanctions, then you admit defeat. And the United States is not willing to admit defeat because it sees a permanent war in Ukraine. That's what it sees. And so Joe Loria wrote that Joe Biden, with Chancellor of Germany Olaf Scholz by his side, promised at a White House press conference in early February that the U.S. was able to shut down the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea if Russia invaded. So we already went over that. Okay, basically he said, I'll be able to do that. That was, I didn't even know that. Olaf was right there. That's funny, but also disturbing, the level of subservience that Europe has to the United States. So evidently the fear in Washington is that the war might not continue as long as it wants, as I was saying before. I argued on February 4th, 20 days before the invasion, that the U.S. was setting a trap for Russia and it needed to invade Ukraine in order to unleash information, economic, and proxy war with the ultimate aim of regime change in Moscow. All of that was confirmed by March 27th. Since then, the U.S. and Britain have done everything it can to keep the war going with the economic sanctions in place. But those sanctions on Russia are devastating the European economy, driving energy prices up and shutting businesses down. Ordinary Europeans are facing a winter which they may not be able to afford heat in their homes. This has led to growing popular unrest and pressure on European governments to end the war, which we covered here. Lift the sanctions and save their economies. Ending the war and lifting the sanctions would lead to the reopening of Nord Stream 2 and the turbine repair of Nord Stream 1, which was also attacked. So Putin did say at Samarkand in Uzbekistan that Russia was ready to resume supplying natural gas to Germany if Germany lifted its sanctions against Russia. Putin said, after all, they need the gas urgently. If things are so bad, just go ahead and lift sanctions against Nord Stream 2 with its 55 billion cubic meters per year. All they have to do is press the button and they will get it going. But they chose to shut it off themselves. They cannot repair one pipeline and impose sanctions against the new Nord Stream 2 and will not open it. Are we to blame for this? Let them think hard about who is to blame and let none of them blame us for their own mistakes. Gazprom and Russia have always fulfilled and will fulfill all obligations under our agreements and contracts with no failures whatsoever. So Putin told it like it was. This is what happened. This is what is happening. So the offer to return normal gas supplies to Europe if the sanctions are lifted, with the war having passed into its most dangerous phase, there's a growing urgency to stop the war. Include talk of a Saudi-led peace process in which Ukraine would cede territory to Russia in exchange for peace. If momentum grows for a near peace deal of any kind, it would ruin Washington's long-term plans to weaken Russia. It would mean Nord Stream 2 would reopen, which would help Germany and Russia, but crush U.S. aims of regime change and make Europe dependent on U.S. energy. I promise you, we will be able to shut down Nord Stream 2, Biden vowed. But how would the U.S. do that if Germany became poised to reopen it? So that's the deal. I mean, it couldn't get any more simple than that, in my opinion. It couldn't get any more simple than that. Like, this is a huge deal, right? This is basically an act of sabotage meant to continue what is quickly becoming a possible nuclear war. This is not a joke. This is not some kind of just tit for tat. The United States is really moving in a suicidal direction, and it is collapsing Europe in the process. Europe is really just a pawn for the United States, just like Ukraine is. Europe is not some equal ally. Under imperialism, there can only be one hegemon, and the United States never allowed Europe to play on an equal footing. When the United States became the imperial superpower, immediately the United States began the process of making Europe capitulate. First, it was through the so-called reparations, right? The so-called recovery, the Bretton Woods institutions, and then snatching the colonies, right? The former colonies, those independent, right? Slowly weaning Europe off of its colonies and allowing the United States to become the primary beneficiaries. Europe was able to keep some of its booty, some of its plunder, but really the process had begun where Europe was going to be a junior actor, a junior partner. But that word partner is always very deceiving under imperialism, because while there is unity among strategic interests with interests among capitalists, there's always going to be state unity when capitalists will benefit. But when competition is beneficial at the root of capitalism, the imperialists will choose that as well. And the United States is choosing that here to sink Europe through this proxy war in order to get to what the real goal is, which is to destabilize the actual adversaries to the United States, the quote unquote adversaries, right? Russia and China. Europe is just kind of the collateral damage here. It really is. And as you saw RT reporting and others, I mean, who wins this? Of course, the military contractors win, because now there's no hope for any kind of dialogue. Europe is now bowing down once again and saying, Russia did it, Russia did it. There will likely be more sanctions before there is any kind of relief, despite the fact that winter is coming. And so the military contractors will benefit greatly from that. American corporations, energy firms are going to benefit greatly from this, because they're going to try to force feed massively expensive fracked gas onto Europe, which of course will not be able to make up for the loss. But these corporations don't care. They just want the short-term profits now. So they're going to try to get what they think is theirs. And so there's that. And then, of course, there's the hope, right, that Russia's economy will actually be damaged by this. As Joe Loria was saying in that article, there is a hope that this will actually damage Russia's economy as well, because the sanctions alone aren't doing it. Russia's currency is high performing. Russia's economic growth is still steady. But now Russia's economic growth going to the negative. It won't go as negative as Germany is about to go. It won't go as negative as maybe Europe as a whole is about to go. But Russia will face economic consequences to this as well. So the only actor here that isn't massively losing from this is the United States. And so the US always, right, should be questioned. Because, I mean, you had the CIA warning about a possible attack and then not telling anybody. That alone, saying, oh, well, there's going to be an attack, Germany, on Nord Stream pipelines. By who? Well, I can't tell you that. I mean, how absolutely ridiculous is that? It just blows my mind how absolutely incredible such a feat. I mean, it's really impressive. It really is, to be able to do that with a straight face and get away with it. That is what U.S. military and economic and imperial power really looks like. It's that impunity. It's not so much that it's successful, because a lot of this is going to have consequences for the United States too. I've been ranting about it to anyone who will listen. Look, whatever calamity strikes Europe is not going to make the United States immune. Yeah, sure, the United States will be temporarily, become fat and be able to ride on Europe's back, but that donkey is about to die. And so the United States will face consequences. You can't do anything to one part of the global capitalist economy and expect to not be hit. And we know in the United States that real working class people, ordinary people, have already been hit, and it's going to get worse for them. Maybe it won't get worse for American monopolies in the energy sector, financiers investing in military contractors, but it's going to get worse for ordinary people here as well. Because, when you have the CIA saying, trust me, bro, I mean, look, this is the CIA, all right? This is what the CIA does. This is what they do. These are the interventions. This is the wars. All parts of the world. Africa, Asia, Latin America, all parts of the world. The CIA is an international terrorist organization, a state terrorist organization. And to think that the United States would just, through the CIA, would just warn and not actually know anything is ridiculous, right? It's obvious that this was an operation and it's one with huge consequences. This is the CIA. This is what they do. All signs point to we should be sniffing in that direction. The investigation should be in that direction. But of course, the militarist, imperialist propaganda machine is going to say Russia, Russia, Russia. So, I mean, there you have it. That's I mean, that's the huge, the whirlwind of Ukraine updates. I mean, it was really just intense how much was going on while I was gone, while I was moving. And it really is hurting people. It really is. We're really witnessing just a watershed moment right now, a watershed moment in history. This thing is getting worse before it gets better. Okay? Because you have the West openly talking about nuclear war. You have Russia openly talking about nuclear weapons because they feel threatened. Now, a lot will say, well, Russia has no reason to be threatened. Really? Because last time I checked, NATO was literally encircling Russia, and that means the entire military arsenal, including nuclear weapons, had a so-called constitutional mandate under NATO. If you're a NATO country and you feel threatened, you say, I feel threatened by Russia, I'm right on Russia's doorstep, then you have the right to use nuclear weapons. So why shouldn't Russia be threatened by that, even that scenario alone? I mean, how many times have we seen the U.S. create pretexts for military interventions and wars? Well, why shouldn't Russia be fearful of one? Seems like the Ukraine proxy war, the special military operation, has created one opportunity after another for the United States to ramp up the situation to the point and escalate the situation to the point where the nuclear conversation is happening. And it should be frightening. You do have the Western media talking openly about this scenarios, right? Here you have the Telegraph, which is really a joke outlet. Really, it's barely anything better. To me, it's still tabloid, even though I know it's not. But it's British press, and it essentially, to me, it's tabloid. But here you have what the U.S. means when it says catastrophic consequences. Should the Russians use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, right? You have the same should China invade Taiwan, right? You have all these conditions. This is what they do. They build up conditions to justify. This is pretext. None of this has happened. Russia's not saying that it's going to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine just because. That the rhetoric is clear from Medvedev, from the Russian government. It's not we're going to just bomb Ukraine with nuclear weapons. No, it's if we feel like NATO-backed and sponsored operations are now threatening our territorial integrity, then we reserve the right to use this option if we feel like there isn't any other. Because what happens when you have a foreign imperialist power invading you in that way, right? Well, what happens is that you have two options. You can certainly a full mobilization and try to defend the country from within, but that's going to cost a lot of people, a lot of lives. The nuclear deterrence seems to be the option if you're going to spare as many people as possible. Ironically enough, as dystopian as that sounds, that's the military strategy. And but here you have none of this actually occurring, but you have basically the Telegraph talking about it. What are the options for retaliation? So they're already thinking about what situation would cause a retaliation. They want the retaliation. This isn't, oh, Russia's going to do it, so we have to know. No, there's no evidence of that. Russia has not used nuclear weapons. It's never threatened it. No. Back during the beginning of the operation back in April, it was not threatening nuclear weapons. It said it was turning its nuclear deterrence on red alert, meaning that they would use nuclear weapons if they were provoked, if they were invaded, if they felt like there was an act of war being committed upon them. not we're going to use it in the special military operation. That was never on the table. So here you have them, though, talking about it like this. What form might the catastrophic consequences, in the words of U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, take should Russia use nuclear weapons in Ukraine? Bob Seeley. So you have possible responses from the West could range from the military, including nuclear strikes, to those targeting Russia's economy. So you see this, including nuclear strikes. So that's on the table. Not, oh, well, we're better, right? It would be so interesting if you heard Western media say, right, I don't know, we're better than those Russians. We're more civilized, quote unquote. We won't stoop to their level. You never hear that, though, right? No, it's always no. We're going to use greater force. We're going to escalate the situation. We're going to make sure that thousands of miles away, we're doing our due diligence to, quote unquote, defend democracy and defend our national security interests. You never hear, oh, well, we're better than them. We're not going to stoop to their level. We're going to use all the means at our disposal, diplomacy, everything, to ensure that nothing like this can happen. No, absolutely not. That's not how imperialism works. So British MP Bob Seeley, an expert on Russian nuclear strategy, says the West's reaction would need to be finely judged, as there's a difference between perception, which is important to understand. First, in Russia, tactical nuclear weapons use is serious, but arguably does not come with the same censure as in the West. Second, in recent Russian nuclear doctrine, tactical nuclear weapons were seen to be a deterrent to Western dominance in the very high-tech precision non-nuclear weapons, so they were part of a usable arsenal. Third, tactical nuclear weapons could be seen as weapons to calm a crisis, the so-called escalate to de-escalate theory, where you trigger a nuclear weapon as a warning. So, I mean, that's all scenario. Again, they're going over more and more scenarios as like, well, Russia doesn't think nuclear weapons are that bad, right? That's basically what they're saying. They're not that bad. We can use them if we want. So, in the event of their use, though, a proportionate military response would be to target an airbase or intelligence hub in Crimea, said William Alberkey, director of strategy, technology, and arms control at, there you go, the International Institute of Strategic Studies, another imperialist think tank. Equally, a couple of strikes in Russia plus a larger number in the Russian-held areas of Ukraine would be appropriate, he told the Daily Telegraph. Of course, the U.S. wouldn't want to go it alone. Oh, no. You got to sink Europe too, right? So you got to get UK and France, as they did in strikes against Libya in 2011. So they're literally saying, yes, we need to wage war on Russia should this happen, right? So what does this sound like? This sounds like its own kind of warning. So Russia has been warning the West, saying, yes, we will use nuclear weapons if we feel threatened, and that Ukraine, there are red lines here, right? Our territory is a red line in these referendums. This is why this is so important. This was written on the 26th, and the referendums were underway. This is why this is very important, because now the referendums are expanding Russia's border. That's what they're going to do, into the east of Ukraine. So now there is all of this opportunity, as the imperialists like to view it. It's not, oh, well, this is a huge problem for us. Maybe it's a huge setback militarily. Maybe we should scale back. No, this is an opportunity for the warmongers, the militarists, the trillions that have gone into this nuclear arsenal to maybe, maybe be experimented with. Maybe there is, right? Maybe there is a scenario, and this should be scary. There is a scenario where, oh, well, could we interpret, right, an attack on could it be interpreted by Russia that an attack by Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces, into the Donbass, now admitted into the Russian Federation, could that spark a potential nuclear conflict? It could, it might, because now you're talking about Russia's borders. And they're drooling over this. They're literally comparing it to Libya and saying, well, we're going to try to get Europe involved, and even if we facilitate the strike, we kind of want them to be a big part of it. So the target set for a Western response would most likely be radars or intelligence or surveillance systems connected to any nuclear strike. Equally vulnerable would be Russia's early warning or command and control nodes, such as headquarters. So again, they're going over war. These targets would likely be in Russia itself rather than Belarus or Russian-held areas of Ukraine. They would shy away from attacking Russian satellites, as targeting space-based assets has been discussed among as permanent 5 members of UN Security Council deemed off limits. I feel so much better now. I feel so much better that the space imperialism of the United States, it's off limits. It's off limits. I feel good. So again, they keep going on and on and on. So retired General Rupert Jones says there are lots of different conventional responses the West could make if Putin were to order the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine, precision strike of the Russian Navy, targeted campaign against Moscow's Air Force would be conventional responses, a direct attack by NATO. Whatever action will be taken, the aim must be to make sure there's uncertainty about future responses. So that's the deal. I mean, basically that nuclear weapons are on the table, and it's like a bunch of conditions being sown, imperialism lusting over this, wanting it, seeing referendums, seeing the expansion of Donbass or of Russia into the Donbass region, right? The fact that now Ukraine is going to have some issues because Russia could easily see attacks on Kherson, on Donetsk, on Lugansk from here on out as direct attacks on Russia. And now they're lusting. And so here you have the Russian nuclear arsenal. They have about 5,000 plus, right? And so, I mean, this is a big, big problem. I'm not going to read this whole article. I just wanted to show you that this is what they're thinking. They are thinking about the nuclear option. They are. That's just the reality. And Russia is saying, this is what they're saying. Russia is saying that we've been put in a position where we have to think about this very seriously. Very, very seriously. So, I'm going to get into the last story here. While you're at it, like the video, of course. Hit that subscription button. So if you're liking the video, it looks like we're good on likes, but keep sharing it. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. All right. Hit that notifications bell. That always helps. And yeah, I'm still hoping for $75 per month more. That'll keep this work sustainable. Keep getting close to it and then going a bit backward. The economic times are hard. I get it. But of course, if you're able to, patreon.com/DannyHaiphong is the best way to support this work. And there's other options in the description as well. I'm also on Rockfin, everyone. So I am actually playing this on Rockfin right now. So Rockfin family, leave a tip if you can. That's always helpful as well. Rockfin.com/the-left-lens. Look me up. All right. And I'll share some more stuff at the end when we get to the end of this stream. Thank you so much, JM. I know you have super chatted me a few times tonight. Thanks so much. So, last thing. I didn't get to cover this, really. So, earlier in September, mid-September, I didn't get to cover this well. Earlier in September, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization met. And I think it's important, right, to always look at things dialectically. I'm going to write a short piece about nihilism because everything we just went over, how could it not spark despair? I mean, we're talking about something that's going on maybe thousands of miles away from us, depending on where you're located. Maybe some of you are out east. Maybe some of you are Chinese. Maybe some of you are Russian. Maybe some of you come from some part of Eastern Europe or Central Asia, West Asia, wherever you are. Maybe you're closer to this. But for working class people in the U.S., oppressed people in the U.S., in the West, for most people, the vast majority, 99% of people, hearing this news, hearing this information might make you think, wow, there's a lot to be concerned about, worried about, in despair about. And so I'm going to write a piece about combat nihilism in the kind of ode to Mao Zedong's combat liberalism, written in 1937 at the height. I shouldn't say the height, but really at the immense growth of the Communist Party of China, leading into the fight, the revolution, right, against the ruling KMT, but also, right, fighting the Japanese aggression, fighting imperialism. But we do need to combat nihilism in that same vein, because it can be too easy to fall into despair in this moment, where it seems like the trajectory, especially when it comes to this proxy war in Ukraine that the United States is spearheading, it can feel like, yes, the world is rolling into nuclear catastrophe. And then you have the homegrown, or I shouldn't say homegrown, because I think imperialism is a homegrown system as well when it comes to the United States. But then you have kind of the issues befalling us within the West, within the United States. I mean, the economic crisis, the pandemic, the ongoing state repression, the ongoing censorship, um, the ongoing persecution of political prisoners, Julian Assange, Mumia Abu Jamal, and then the many more lesser known names. You just have this going on. And it just seems like, there's just one thing after another. And then you have the kind of immediate things that happen. The Hurricane Ian, right? Hurricane Ian's going to kill a lot of people. Already has. I told you in Florida. More than 100, probably. Who knows how many? But it's probably going to make its way up, and it could become a hurricane again in the South Carolina, right? There's all this new bad news. So it could be like, it could be that we feel very hopeless about this moment. And that even amongst us on the real left, socialist, communist, it wouldn't be a surprise if there weren't a lot of people feeling that way. I had somebody who texted me recently, member of the Communist Party. He texted me saying, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be part of this because they're going for the Democrats again. And I can't do that business, right? The CPUSA is making a huge shift toward the election, saying it's a time to vote against fascism. They're going to go all in with Democratic Party campaigns. You have people getting excited about Bernie Sanders again. Possibly. It seems like there's kind of this repetitive stress, right? It's like a repetitive toxic stress happening. And so it wouldn't be a surprise if people felt nihilistic. But I think we still need to combat that nihilism, and revolutionary optimism is the only way. And I hear Nick over at Revolutionary Blackout Network talk about it. And I just want to say that revolutionary optimism also doesn't just come from an orientation, a mentality, but it comes from real participation in the struggle and the hope that gives us in the future and also in the present, building toward a new reality, building toward that socialist reality, doing what we can to get that done, and to be curious about history, to be curious about that struggle, to really embed ourselves in it, to do the work that we feel like we can do, and to do it to our full capacity. That can give us hope, as well as understand that when we are curious about the history, the struggle, then we do see all sides of things. We can actually begin to think dialectically. It's really hard in times of despair. I mean, I'm also a mental health therapist. I'm also a social worker. So I know very, very closely from, the outside, working with a whole bunch of different kinds of different people over the course of my life, but even in my own life, right? When you are feeling despair, whether we call it depression or anxiety, or if it's induced by something else, our minds, this is how our brain works, it's narrow. Our path, our outlook, it becomes narrow, and it becomes very fulfilling for capitalists and imperialists to exploit us even further based on this fact and reality. So it's kind of it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just, it's kind of how the wheel turns. But the dialectic of this is that no matter how bad it gets, there's always resistance, and there's always just struggle, and there's always victorious struggle. So I'll give you some examples before I get into the story about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You have, for example, Cuba. I think a couple of people died. I tweeted that no one died. I guess a few people were killed by Hurricane Ian in Cuba. But over the course of many decades now, there have been natural disaster after natural disaster, mainly hurricanes and storms, hit Cuba, and very few people have died. Usually no one dies. So Cuba is a country sanctioned to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars lost since 1960 by the United States, literally stolen from Cuba. Cuba remains a poor country in terms of GDP and all of that, but its socialist system has not only improved life to the point where people live longer than they do in Florida at baseline, longer than they do in the United States at baseline, a better education than much of the Western world, the best education system in Latin America, in the Caribbean, best healthcare system arguably in the region as well, universal innovation, biotechnology. I can go on and on and on about Cuba's achievements. But the fact of the matter is that it is just an achievement alone to protect so many people, 50, to the tune of what we know of, perhaps 50, 100 times better than what the United States could do. The same goes with Cuba and COVID-19, right? So that's the other side of the dialectic, that there is another world that is possible. There is another way of living that is possible. There's another system that's possible. So we have to understand that there's always going to be resistance, and that resistance is here. It's happening globally, and it's also happening here as well. It's just a different level. It's just a different context. It's at a different point in the struggle, right? So we have to have our revolutionary optimism, and we do that by understanding that there are real material victories being won by oppressed and exploited peoples of the world everywhere they are, happening right now, even if it feels like things are in retreat within the imperialist orbit. And wouldn't it make a lot of sense, not to say that this should make us feel better necessarily, that an empire in decline led by the United States, the Western imperialist order, that in its era of decline, that you would see victories emerging elsewhere. Now, during the Cold War, you saw a lot of victories happening while imperialism was still a budding system. It was advanced at that time as well, but it still had room to grow. And that's why the United States was able to wrestle hold of that superpower status and become the chief citadel of monopoly capital. Well, now we're in a different situation. All of imperialism is sinking. And the United States, of course, is trying to hold itself up on top of everyone else, including Europe, as we said before. But there's also something else happening. And we talk about it a lot. I've talked about it with Ben Norton, with Carlos Martinez, with so many different folks. So we're going to talk about this. This is going to be, it's a huge part of this channel, talking about the rise of multipolarity, the rise of a multipolar world. And many people think of that as, well, it's just governments of different systems. And of course, imperialism and capitalism still exist. So it's not good, right? Well, it's more complex than that. There is a huge element of resistance to it, of global resistance from oppressed nations to imperialism. And that's what the Shanghai Cooperation Organization represents. That's what these multilateral institutions led by mainly Russia and China, but also many of its global South partners, that's what it represents. That's what the integration projects in Latin America, the ALBA, all of it, that's what they represent, right? So I'm going to talk about the growing significance of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, because I think this article written in Economic and Political Weekly goes over something. You know, the 15th and 16th in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, there was the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. And that summit admitted Iran into the organization. And we covered that here briefly. But this goes over the significance of what this means and how it fits into this overall understanding of this dialectic. Yes, we are living in a sinking ship. We are living in a sinking militarized ship. We are. And that should make us feel a lot of different things, because it has such a profound impact on our lives. But then we have to understand that there is a global struggle going on that we need to be involved with in some way and in some form within our capacity, because it is that significant. This is not to say we can't be involved in local struggles. We should be. We should be organizing workers. We should be organizing oppressed people. We should be trying to build their power right here, right now. But also, we can't forget about this part, because if we forget it, that's what a big part of my work is. We can't forget about this part, because if we do, well, we will be missing a huge part of what's going on worldwide, and we will be well behind these developments, as we already are. So let me just read this briefly, okay? Because I think Atul Bardwaj makes really good points. He says, or she says, I'm not sure the gender of this person, the city of Samarkand, located in northeastern Uzbekistan, one of the leading most important sites on the ancient Silk routes traversing Central Asia, hosted the 22nd Leaders Summit at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization on 15th, 16th of September. It was the first in-person gathering of the grouping since 2019. In addition to the leaders of the SCO member states, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, Turkmen President Sadar Berdimuhamedov, and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko also took part in the summit. One of the highlights of Samarkand was Iran's accession to the SCO as a full member. Iran's entry solidifies the Russia-China-Iran alliance. The trio, often seen in negative light by the West, intends presenting an alternative world order that is reasonably multipolar. Belarus is likely to gain the status of a full member at the SCO in the next summit to be held in India. The success of the importance of the SCO lies in the fact that Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Emirates, the Maldives, and Myanmar are all aspiring to be members of the organization. The growing interest in the region is mainly the result of China's economic power and its potential to bring investments and infrastructure into countries that see the West in decline. The growing alignment of Russia and China strategic interests, Russian and Chinese strategic interests, has further increased the significance of Central Asia in the international politics, and this has led to the rise in its security and geopolitical dimensions. The reluctance to defy the United States is fast disappearing in the world that can see alternatives emerging in global political economy. The twin reasons driving the West Asian and Gulf countries towards the SCO are Beijing's growing economic potential and power, and the growing perception that the West has lost its sheen as a dependable partner. The West Asian countries can clearly see that the SCO represents countries with the largest reserves of oil and natural gas and are among the largest energy consumers. The SCO members together account for 30% of the global domestic gross domestic product. So 30% of the world's economies basically are Shanghai Cooperation Organization members. The Ukraine invasion did cast a significant shadow at the meeting of Samarkand. Putin's speech at the summit clearly talked about forging a group that includes China and India to become a significant global counterweight to the US-led West, which has imposed sanctions on Russia. Many countries did express their reservation in making SCO a geopolitical arena focused exclusively on anti-Americanism. For example, India, which is also part of the Quad, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, has to do a great deal of balancing to ensure it does not antagonize the US by traveling an extra mile to strengthen the SCO. However, the undercurrents of strategic exhaustion with the West are discernible among countries present at the summit. That there is a need for an alternative to the global order determined by the US and its Western allies cannot be denied. The West Asian countries are certainly looking for new options to trade their oil and in a currency other than the dollar. The 21st century geopolitical arena is not confined to the Indo-Pacific and has moved to the Eurasian heartland. China is clearly playing the game in both the maritime as well as the continental domain. On the one hand, China's navy is willing to indulge in confrontation with the Anglo-Saxon sea power in the Indo-Pacific, and on the other, it's using economic cooperation to build land bridges across the Eurasian landmass. Both the confrontation on the high seas and cooperation deep inside Eurasia are part of a strategy to undermine the dominance of maritime powers that have ruled the world and set the standards for international trade for centuries. I would argue with this. I read the article very briefly, and I thought that it makes some good points that are about to come up. But I will just say as a note, I don't believe China's strategy is to undermine through naval attacks and like naval power even. I think that really is a response to how the U.S. has used this kind of freedom of navigation to militarize that region and has really compelled China to have to keep up as a deterrence. Like, I do think the reason why China does have its navy and all of that within its own waters, oh my God, so crazy. But the reason why it has had to expand that is because of these growing threats from a superpower very far away. That has nothing to do with the Pacific. But nonetheless, let's continue. It's not a huge point in this article, but I do think that it is incorrect to say that it's trying to undermine the power of these so-called maritime imperialists through its own kind of maritime military strategy. I don't see that as much, but I do see it really complementing the economic side of this. That China does want to keep the seas open and the ocean open for its, in the Pacific open for its economic activity. So military is going to be part of that, especially when you have a militarized superpower breathing down your neck. So the elements of this two-pronged strategy are visible in the significance that China attaches in the SCO, which was created in 2001 and continues to be an important element of Russia's Look East policy and China's Belt and Road Initiative. The control over the region is crucial for both countries in their quest against U.S. hegemony. The question before the SCO is whether to focus on Russo-China geopolitical competition with the U.S. or endeavor to transform itself into a global economic platform. Though the SCO is about guarding against military intrusions by the West, more importantly, it is about building efficient transportation corridors conjoining the Eurasian continent, neglected due to the dominance of sea lines communication. It is about new Silk Road routes through sustained investments and efforts. The Chinese railway carries more than $75 billion of goods via Kazakhstan and Russia to Europe. This is a big development, and in 2016, only $8 billion of goods were carried on this route. A new railway line connecting China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan is likely to begin by 2023, which would open a route from China to Europe, shortening the journey some 900 kilometers and 8 days. Thus, the organization is about reducing existing inequalities between the coastal regions and landlocked countries. It is about offering the world greater options for trade and commerce. And yes, that is all true. I will add that it is completely in line. I mean, to say, I don't like this distinction, right? Russo-China geopolitical competition with the U.S. or endeavor to transform itself into a global economic platform. First of all, I mean, this is led by China and in part Russia, but it really is led by China. And so to think that China has some kind of geopolitical element to this, yes, of course. I think that's by default, honestly. I think that, of course, this is a response to the way that geopolitics and U.S. militarization and all of that has transpired, the aggression that has transpired over the last decade. Yes, the SCO is certainly a response to that. But it's also, I think, completely in line with this global economic platform outlook. China is not here saying we want to be a hegemon with Russia. No, it's saying that this is a platform for everybody, and we're going to increase the access, the visibility, the capacity, everything, all of it. We're going to increase the capabilities of all countries involved to create robust trade routes, robust economic arrangements that can get the job done for these countries and ensure that the U.S. and the West's decline and calamities and crises that they're facing doesn't further worsen what was already a deleterious situation for much of the world. Because the U.S.-led imperialist order, what did it create? Massive inequality, massive poverty, massive instability, and the problems that much of the world face, especially the working class, are because of the way that this imperialist juggernaut alliance has operated. And so that's what the SCO is certainly a response to. And I think that these developments, right, increasing railway connectivity, increasing the capacity for the Belt and Road Initiative and Russia's own, Eurasian Union and the Look East policy, all of that, all of the strategic development that's occurring is all about being able to lift oppressed nations out of that status. So economically, there's a real progressive trajectory to this, a real progressive strategy, a real progressive vision. It's not just, oh, everyone wants to make money and people want to make money. No, it's about laying the material basis, increasing the productive forces so that oppressed nations can get out of the status of being oppressed nations, of being impoverished nations, of being underdeveloped nations, of being neo-colonial nations, of being nations that have standards of living unfit for human life, which much of these countries do. And that's just the reality of the situation. It's a very sad reality, but it's one that was born from imperialist colonial exploitation. And I didn't even get to all that was happening with Azerbaijan and Armenia. And then you also had, what was it, the border skirmish that was happening in that region as well. So that's all a byproduct of the fall of the Soviet Union, right? So the neoliberal capitalist imperialist order is in decline. The SCO and institutions like it, this alliance between China, Russia, and Iran, this broader vision for integration, all of it is key to anti-imperialism and should foster revolutionary optimism in the sense that there are major actors in the world seeking to change the decrepit condition that exists from imperialist exploitation. And so that should give us all hope because it's happening, it's succeeding, and there really isn't anything short of that nuclear button that we were talking about that can really stop this overall trajectory. That's the point of this. That should give us optimism just as much as we have despair for the aggression, for the recklessness, for the the incomprehensibility of U.S. imperialism's contradictions. As much as we are feeling the pain from those, we have to maintain optimism for the resistance that is happening, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a big part of that. So that's it for the content for today, folks. I'm going to stay on for another 15 minutes or so. You got me for another 15 minutes. All right. But I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. All right. So keep liking the video. Of course, hitting that subscribe button, hitting that notifications bell so you know when I'm on. Also, subscribe on Patreon. Become a member. Subscribe on Substack. Become a member. Help support this work. All those links are in the description. Look for 75 per month would be great to keep this work sustainable. And that would be amazing. Rockfin folks, of course, if you're over there, rockfin.com/the left lens, you can leave a tip. So there you have it, everyone. That's what's going on. I'll stay on with all of you. If you have any super chat questions, I'm going to look through some of these super chats now. And thank you all. So TW Lamb says China is peaceful and benevolent superpower. The West needs to study Confucianism to understand China. There is definitely truth to that. I mean, you got to understand it's a big part of China, also the Communist Party of China's vision, as well integrating concepts from Confucianism, taking the concepts. A lot of people are like, oh, wasn't that a kind of a semi-feudal period in China? Well, there are principles that are being taken, okay? Principles, not necessarily repeating Confucianism of that era or what it sprung out of, I should say. So, Hassan Ahmadi, thanks for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Let's see. All right. I think I got those super chats. Thanks so much for supporting. You can leave a super chat question if you have any. Let's see. So I think JM already. All right. So, yeah, I mean, I've been going for a while, so I'm just going to chill out here with all of you. Let the stream kind of burn. Oh, announcement. Tomorrow I am on. So the reschedule is happening. Okay. So the reschedule of a stream I was supposed to have with Alex from Reportify is happening tomorrow night at 9. So not exactly this time, but tomorrow night at 9. And we're going to talk about a lot of things, and I look forward to that. So be sure to check us out tomorrow at 9. So this is kind of like a 3 in 3 days thing. 3 in 3 days. So tomorrow, and then the Duran is coming on 9 p.m. The following night. So a lot to catch up on, as you can see from the week away that I was gone for. You know, in some way it was kind of a good break from streaming, but at the same time I was hustling. You can see the background is not my bookshelf, not there. Our bookshelf not there yet. Hopefully we'll be up. I'm hoping within the next few days. Crossing my fingers on that. But yeah, and you're gonna hear a little bit more of an echo. So unfortunately, the Durant, they may hear that. Don't know what to do about that because the apartment is just what it is right now. So I got a super chat from 22 Manny. I'll address this. You see Door's video on the Italian fascist leader. Is there anything left for us to do with Door and those kinds? Well, I wouldn't approach this as like those kinds. Um, in terms of comments on this, I mean, look, it's obvious. Thank you for the super chat. I mean, it's obvious that this Italian leader has really right-wing roots, uh, from which he says God, country, this kind of stuff. I mean, there's some people who are trying to say, oh, well, she's against financial speculators, but she's also, is she really? I mean, that's what a lot of fascists have said as well. But really, they're just monopolists, capitalists in their own right, and they push forward fascistic ideology, which she has a history of doing. I don't even remember her name because I've been trying to stay away from that. Georgia Maloney. I mean, look, like I don't agree. If there's praise being thrown her way, I've seen some things. I haven't seen Jimmy Dore's video. I've seen others say, well, her COVID policy, she was against vaccines or something like that. Like people know I'm open about this. For me, I was never on that kind of like. I wouldn't call myself pro-vaccine. I wouldn't call myself anti-vaccine. I would call myself someone who is for a better response to COVID-19 than the one we got, and I'm gonna keep it at that. So when it comes to opportunists who try to latch on to the COVID-19 crisis for their own political gain, I just can't get down with that. I can't get down with that. So I've never tried to do that on my own. I've never tried to jump on to whatever narrative is trending on Twitter because I think it's very complex. Like these experimental vaccines, yeah, they were created by lots of government sponsored money. They weren't maybe the best thing that we could have gotten, and certainly there are a lot of consequences that we still don't know. But at the same time, there's also a lot of data that says that there's been some, I wouldn't say it's progress because so many people have died of COVID. I don't think the vaccines could have ever brought progress, but in terms of reducing symptoms, all of that, there's some data, but I'm not a data expert. So again, COVID-19 feels like swirling narratives to me. And my opinion has always been, it's not vaccine or anti-vaccine. It's not mandate or anti-mandate. It's about looking at the materialist issue. The materialist issue that our governments not only neglected us, but used COVID as a weapon, an economic weapon, a military weapon, and of course, a political weapon to worsen our lives. And that's exactly what happens. And Maloney, she's very pro-Ukraine, very pro-NATO, very anti-China, very anti-Russia, and she is on the far right. And Europe's far right is always very connected to fascists. That's just the deal. Same with the United States' far right. It's always going to be connected to fascists in some degree historically, right? I mean, look at the Klan. The Klan is a fascist organization. Um, that's just how. Thank you, JM, again for another super sticker. Really appreciate that. That's what fascism is, fascism is the most violent form of capitalism. It is the uh, uh, decision made by capitalists amid usually widespread crisis, and usually that crisis includes massive resistance to imperialism. It's the response, right? It's the organization of the state to absolutely disallow any kind of resistance to it. And so the rudiments, this is why I hate conversations about fascism, because it's like, oh, you call it fascist, that's so mean. Oh, don't call me names. Oh, it's a label. You can't just use fascism for everything. But to be honest, in the United States and Europe, I mean, we could say other places as well, but especially in the United States and Europe, fascism is always there. It's not just an ideology. It's not just an individual or multiple individuals. It's always there. So when you have people like Maloney, when you have these far right figures come up, yeah, they're connected to fascism. So are neoliberals. But the difference is that one side wants a sophisticated route to fascism, and the other side wants to uh, uh, really bring fascism home as quickly as possible, right? That's how I look at it. So yeah, I mean, I don't, with the whole Jimmy Dore's video. No, I haven't watched it. To be honest, I've been trying to just keep up with Ukraine. Really, like keep up with Ukraine, keep up, and there's been so many other things I wanted to keep up with. I've been trying to, um, write as well, like get a little bit into writing, but it's hard. It's hard to keep it going. Um, so I'm writing a little bit less now, but I should have something brewing soon. Let's see. Oh, Karina, thanks so much, Karina. I appreciate that. From Anti-Conquista, thanks so much. Thanks for coming. So yeah, I mean, my life right now is in transition as well. So, just spent like, I don't even know how, I mean, the movers alone were like, whew, like $700 something. I was like, whoa, here we go again. Yeah, but we're here. The apartment is, yeah, no, the apartment will be good. Luckily, even though we gotta pay more rent for it, it's not a complete like, oh, we're just paying the same rent, a higher rent for the same thing. It's a little nicer. I mean, bigger. Instead of just a kitchenette, it's like an eat-in kitchen, but it's the same size, honestly. Um. So yeah, I mean, it's serviceable. It'll do us good, but we're sick of moving. I kid you not. I kid you not. I've moved 10 times in 10 years. I'll tell you my roots. So I moved. Okay, let's just say I graduated from college, right? Moved back home. I'm not counting that because I'm home. Then I move in with who is now my wife. Move in with her. That was my first move. It's probably like a year later or something like that. We moved from that apartment. We were just sharing a room to our own apartment. Not a year after that. Stay there for less than a year. She sold the home, move again. Then we end up in a slum apartment, infested with mice. And like, oh man, it was bad. Like, you know. So move in there, stay there for, I think we broke the lease because we were going. My wife was getting ready to, well, she was not my wife yet, but she was getting ready to go back to school, wanted to move back home. So I move in with a friend. Well, she's back in New York City. No, we move into this shared room for 1 month during that transition. That's 4. Then she moves to New York City a month later. I move in. That's 5 with with him. I stayed there for like 6 months. No, what was that? August. Less than 6 months. 4 months with him for 4 months. Moved to New York. So this is from 2013 to 2017. So I got 6 and 3. Yeah, you heard it. 6 moves in 3. So after that, we're there for a good chunk, luckily. And the next 3 years, we're living with my wife's parents. Then COVID happens, and there's, they move to their cooperative cabin, like their communist bungalow. My wife's parents are communists. They need to come back because unfortunately health issues, other things, they needed to be in the city. We didn't want to stick around in the city while they were home, especially as my wife started working again. So in medical facilities. So we moved to we subletted a friend's like co-op, like low income co-op. We did that for 10 months. Then we moved back to the same area as my wife's parents, but subletting from a different person while we looked for our own place after the sublet ran out elsewhere. So that's 8. We moved out of there into our prior apartment. That's 9. And then number 10 is this move. So there you have it. There you have it, everyone. This is one of the most frustrating things about capitalism is that you try to sustain organizational commitment and never has, media has been it's been great that I have this, I guess you could say, skill. I don't know. I think I have some skill in writing and doing this kind of analysis, but yeah, like organizational commitments, how can you keep them when you move so much? You can't. You're always moving. You're always preparing for a move. You're going somewhere else. Like I changed states, cities once, but really when you're moving around and it's happening year after year after year, sometimes multiple times in a year, forget about it. And you're working and you're trying to do other things. Yeah, it's hard to keep organizational commitment. Neoliberal austerity and the precarious nature of life definitely keeps us. I mean, that's one of the things that sows despair. I've definitely been in that multiple times in my life where it's like, wow, I'm trying to keep committed and is like my day-to-day life. I'm just thrown for a loop and it's toxic stress. Like last night I was just like, I think I had been just running on adrenaline over the last couple of days. And last night I was just like, I was just noticed I was like angry. I was just angry. I was just very reactive, kind of like hyper vigilant, right? And like every little thing, like I spent like 15 minutes trying to kill a fly. Like I kid you not. I spent 15 minutes trying to kill a fly because I was like, get this effing fly out of our face. I don't want to deal with it. Scaring my dog, just like everywhere. I don't want it to be. And there you go. I couldn't catch myself. I think I went to bed like that. I woke up and I was just like, oh my God, I was ridiculous. But that's toxic stress, baby. Toxic stress. So yeah, that's why we got to keep revolutionary optimism any way possible. And so yeah. Salgado says that's needing sleep. Certainly. I slept 1 hour. I slept a number of hours, like 8 this from yesterday to today. But the night before that, leading into all the things we had to do, I slept like an hour, So yeah, I mean, I was just chilling for a little while with all of you. You know, I I should probably go. It's 10:30. So with that said, yeah, this is what life is like out here. I'm just gonna check the chat out. I want to see what you all are saying. I don't want to get into the Jimmy Dore conversation. Me either. I think, for whatever it's worth, right? I think, for the people that do the work I do, there's got to be a way to get this message out, and we're gonna have disagreements on other issues. We are, but we got to have unity on something, and for sure, I just media personalities, I don't make it about that, right? It's about the content. I don't agree with everyone on everything that are also doing independent media. Big Teal said, moving 10 times is a lot. Yeah, I'm never repeating this again. Thank you for the comment, though. I don't know. Like, I find myself when I'm one of the ways I cope with toxic stress, and it's something that I do need to shift a little bit, is I do this work even more, because it's something I can control when everything else feels just so uncontrollable. But that can lead to some exhaustion and things like that. So like taking that week off of streaming was big. Even though it wasn't like I did nothing, I was clipping and all of that. But yeah, no, it's now there have been times where this kind of stuff was happening where I was writing more, like I was writing like 2 articles or something ridiculous. But with that said, though, guys, I'm going to thank you. We need critical thinking. Yeah, I don't let go. No one's manipulating me. Thank you. We need critical thinking. I am not going to get into these like fights online. Like, hell no. That is not something I'm going to do. You come to this channel, we come here, and you come to this channel. I hope not to be clickbaited into some kind of personality war, even if it has ideas rooted in it. But let's be honest, these streaming platforms, what do they fuel? They don't fuel unity and solidarity. They should. At least the actors who are trying to do that should be interested in that. But they do fuel a division, and they often aren't the place where you can work out disagreements in a way that works. Like, it's just not, because there is a profit motive behind this kind of work. And I mean, I've just learned that now since monetizing some of my content. But it's ugly. And so I think that there are some things that we shouldn't ignore, but we should keep it about the ideas, so that kind of like Mao said, right? Let 100 flowers bloom. Well, let's build our ideology, our socialist or communism, socialist ideology. Let's build it out. Let's get more people really on our side. Let's do what Lenin said. Win over the advanced. Win over the advanced and build more of it. Doesn't have to be a majority, but build a committed minority of professional revolutionaries, right? Who then can be organized to combat these divisions and to work them out in ways that make the most sense. That's what I see as the real task here. But I'm going to get out of here, all right? So as Big Teal said here, check out my link tree. It's in the description right here. You should support the Left Lens any way you can. Yes, there's Patreon, there's Substack. There's much more in the description, but my link tree is everything. You can go find me on Telegram at Danny Dhaiphong, or search the Dhaiphong Press, which is the channel. You can go on Telegram. Tomorrow, I will be on live here again with Alex from Reportify. We will be talking about China and probably a lot more than that. I'm sure Ukraine will come up. We will also be talking to the Durant here. So the Durant is coming on October 1st. So 9 p.m. tomorrow, September 30th, 9 p.m. October 1st with the Durant. Save the date. Save the date. Save the date. And there's much more coming up even the next week. And I just got to say, appreciate all of you for coming. Like the video, share, do all that good stuff. Go to the description, all the good stuff before you go. And again, we have the logo now here. We have the intro music. We're going to have more overlays and all that to come as well. And so I want to thank, those who have been helping me with all of that. The channel, the channel art is different. All of that takes work and labor. So make sure you support this channel. That is their wish. That is their wish. Support this channel. Okay. All right, everyone. Good night. Thank you to all the moderators as well. And Rockfin family, thank you for watching. And I will see you all again tomorrow night. All right. I want to see just as many. I want to see at least, we had 300 plus tonight. I want to see 400 tomorrow. All right. Take good care. Good night, everyone.